Good morning, Columbia County teachers. This is Jeff Carney. I'm going to take a few minutes to go through just maybe 6 or 7 slides to try to help explain the TEM score that you probably have been discussing with your evaluator or your principals, your administration at your school. The teacher effectiveness measure is going to be calculated just like it was last year. So if you bear with me, maybe I'll be able to help answer some questions about that and student growth. In review, keep in mind your TEM score, your teacher effectiveness measure, which you will get at the end of this evaluation cycle, is made up of 2 main areas, TAPS and student growth. TAPS is your observations, the 2 10-minute walkthroughs, the one formative, and then the next semester the same thing, and any of the meetings that you have all come under the TAPS process. Student growth depends upon what assessment your students took. If they took a state-mandated test such as CRCT or EOCT, this year it'll be Georgia Milestones, or if SLOs were created, if it wasn't a state-mandated test, all that comes under student growth. So those are the 2 main areas. I did put in the light purple box the surveys of instructional practice. Those are the student surveys, but I want you to see that basically they're just used to inform the TAPS process. When you meet in your pre-evaluation conference or during the year, that information is simply used to inform the formative process in your evaluation process. It does not go, those scores from your surveys do not go directly into your TEM score. So a lot of teachers still think that, but it's not the case. It simply informs the TAPS process. The entire TAPS process is just like it was last year. You've already had your orientation and you're familiar with it. If you're new, you'll become familiar with it during the year. You've probably already had your self-assessment, and you'll be having your pre-evaluation conference any day now. Then the observations start, and per semester, each semester is accustomed to it's called a phase. It's a formative assessment phase. It consists of 2 10 to 15 minute walkthrough observations and 1 30-minute formative observation. That's one phase. You do that first semester, then you have your mid-year conference. Then second semester, you have that phase all over again, 2 10 to 15-minute walkthroughs and 1 formative observation. Then at the end of the year, you have your summative assessment and your summative evaluation conference, which results basically in your TEM score this year. Wanted to make sure you understood how the points work on the rating scale for TAPS. At the end of the year, after your summative evaluation, there are 10 performance standards that you're being evaluated on. And for each standard, you will earn either 3, 2, 1, or 0 points per standard. And you simply add together the points from the 10 standards, and that resulting total defines the final rating level as shown in the chart below. So if you add up all the 10 points from your 10 standards, you will see if it falls between 0 and 6, you're definitely ineffective. That means on 10 standards, there were some you got 0 points on. So hopefully we don't have any teachers like that in Columbia County. If you add up the points and they fall between 7 and 16, that's excuse me, level 2. And 17 to 26 points equals level 3 or proficient, which is the expected level of performance. And 27 to 30 points equals level 4 or exemplary. Just know that for 2014 and 15, the TAPS part of your TEM score is going to be the only thing that's in your TEM score. Student growth will not be included this year, so you don't have to worry about last year's student growth. Remember, on any evaluation, when this is fully operational, they'll use this year's observations or the TAPS process and last year's student growth scores because it's lagging data. But for this year, you don't have to worry about last year's student growth because it's not going to be used on your TEM score for this year. And keep in mind, there's a lot of stress about if somebody gets a needs development that it's going to ruin them or make them needs development. It's not. A teacher can get 3 needs developments on their summative and get 7 proficient scores and still get a cut score of 17, which equates to level 3. So do not worry if you get 1 or 2 needs developments on your summative evaluation, as long as you have the proficient scores at level 3 or 4 to balance that out. And 99% of our teachers do just that. This is a chart that I shared with our administrators in July, and when this evaluation process is fully operational, according to the state, we will be using this, but for now we're not. Again, Georgia is not using student growth measures for your TEM score this year. When this is in operation, you'll see across the horizontal axis, levels 1, 2, 3, and 4, the TAPS ratings, that's how they're scored now in levels 1, 2, 3, and 4. And on the vertical axis, you will see that that's the student growth, levels 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's calculated, and this is calculated. Two separate measures, and wherever they meet on this chart is what your overall evaluation or your TEM score will result in. Just because we're not using the student growth measure this year, like Georgia's saying they're not, for your evaluation, it's still going to be collected. That information will be sent to your superintendent for basically simple reports so you can see what your growth would have been, but it will not be used for your teacher effectiveness measure this year. Student growth, there are two main areas. One is the student growth percentiles. They go from level 1 to level 4. These are for any state mandated exams like the CRCTs, the EOCTs. This year we'll have Georgia milestones. So you have student growth percentiles from these standardized tests. Level 1 is the lowest. The mean growth percentile for your students would be 0 to 29. Level 2 would be 30 to 40. Level 3, or the expected level of performance, the mean growth percentile of your students would be 41 to 65. And level 4 would be a mean growth percentile of 66 and over. For your SLO courses, those are the ones that don't have state mandated tests, so our teachers have created these tests and will be administering the pre-test and post-test this year. Just know that for elementary and middle school, the expected level of performance for SLOs is 35 to 40%. Elementary and middle is using 40, high school is using 35. That's the expected level of performance. So if 0 to 49% of your students hit that expected level of performance mark of either 35 or 40%, you will be level 1. If 50 to 79% demonstrate the expected level, you'll be level 2. If 80 to 89% hit that expected level, you'll be level 3. And if 90 to 100 hit that expected level, it's level 4. Keep in mind those expected levels are pretty fair to the teachers. 35 and 40% of expected growth is pretty fair. That's not pushing it a whole lot, yet it's not lowering the bar any lower than it already is by the state of Georgia. So it's a very fair benchmark. So our teachers won't have any problem hitting the 80 to 89, and many will hit the 90 to 100. So don't worry about the student growth under SLOs either. Teachers that teach both SGP courses and SLO courses, maybe you teach, and I gave an example, if you teach U.S. history, you have 40 students in U.S. history, that is an EOCT course, and that same teacher teaches 60 students in psychology, which is an SLO course. This is the way the state will calculate what your TEM score is going to be once growth is taken into effect, which is not this year and probably not next year according to the DOE. We're just playing it by ear at this point for next year. But level 3, under SGP, the U.S. history kids, there were 40 of them, and they showed growth at the level 3 level. That's worth 3 points because level 3 is worth 3 points. They multiply it times the 40 students, and they get a score of 120. That same teacher in the psychology class that had the SLO test only performed at the level 2 in student growth. So you multiply the 2 times the 60 students, and you get 120 points. You add the two classes of points together and you get a 240 over 100. You simply put that number, the total points, over the total number of students, and you simply do the math, and the student growth score is 2.4, but the student growth scores that round into your TEM score are whole numbers. They either round down or up. In this case, the 2.4 is rounded down to 2. If that score would have been 2.5, it would have rounded up to 3. So this TEM score would have been rounded to 2, which is a level 2. Keep in mind the TEM implementation schedule. I'll remind you at the top, your TEM score is basically from two main areas. That's your TAPS, your observations, and your student growth, which is not being used this year. Last year, that was the way it was done. You'll see in 2013-14, it was all basically your your observations and whatever student survey information was included to inform your TAPS, but student growth was not included. Likewise, this year, you'll see in red, the only thing that's going to be calculated into your TEM score is your observations, the current year's observations. And last year's student growth will not be included this year. And keep in mind, if this ever does become operational, this evaluation cycle by the state, they will always use the current year's observations and last year's student growth. It's called lagging data, and that's just the way it's set up. In 15 and 16, if it's implemented, they will use 15 and 16 year observations and the growth data from 14 and 15 in your TEM score. Likewise, in 2016-2017, they'll use that year's observations and the previous year's student growth data. Those two are combined to get your TEM score. Everyone, or not everyone, but a lot of people were suddenly concerned about losing their certificate. The PSC did pass a rule because it became a law that if a teacher scored needs development or ineffective 2 years in a row, it would negate their certificate or their certificate would be nullified. And that is true. However, 99% of our teachers will not be in danger of losing their certificates due to a low teacher effectiveness measure. We have about 1,700 teachers, so you can do the math and tell that on any given year we have just a handful of teachers that would be in that position, and that 1% would lose their certificate whether they were on TEKS or the old evaluation instrument. So don't get caught up and worried about that new PSC rule. We'll have a few teachers that do lose their certificate, but it's not because of this TEKS evaluation instrument or the student growth model. And let's face it, if Columbia County teachers aren't capable of keeping their certificates, how do you think the rest of the state's going to fare? So I think there's not much that you need to be worried about in Columbia County. And the key to having an exemplary evaluation is teach the standards for your grade level or content area. That's where your focus needs to be. And then have a great rapport with your kids. Your student survey results will be fine. Keep in mind those student surveys are based on standards 3, 4, 7, and 8. And teach like a pirate. I'm not going to go into all of what that acronym stands for, but those of you that saw Dave Burgess and heard and have read his book, you know what that entails. And if you do that, you're going to be just fine on this evaluation instrument. And I'll close with this slide because you're sitting at the corner of awesome and bomb diggity, because that's how Columbia County teachers are. You do an awesome job of working with our kids, and we have awesome kids to work with, and this is the year of awesomeness. Don't forget that. So just take this in stride, this evaluation process. We'll get through it together. If you do have questions, let your administrators know, because I'll be asking them for information, and we'll periodically do voice threads like this to keep everybody on the same page. But just go and do your thing and be the awesome teacher that you are, and you'll be fine this year. Thank you.